Ann Lee and I have recorded 8 episodes of our podcast here in Wilmington, North Carolina called Cape Fear Calling. We have not published anything, we have not scheduled anything, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight on some of what's been working for us and what's not been working for us in this local in-person podcast. What's up, everyone? If you don't know me, my name is Rich Cardona. I am a podcaster and I own a media company, and we focus on video podcasts. Our team produces some of the top podcasts in the world, and my goal is to just give you insight onto all these little experiments that we're doing. We wanted to make sure we're documenting the journey, so I wanted to do something that was pretty challenging versus a standard virtual studio type podcast, and I wanted to do in person with a videographer, with local businesses, lugging the gear around, all that good stuff, so that way you could have insight, because if you don't go for this, then anything you do is going to be a lot easier. So as always, I always like to kind of call out the gear that we're using, and today we are not using the Canon EOS Rs. The only thing that we're using is an iPhone 14 Pro, I think, right there. I think I have it set at 4K, 30 frames per second. I got a GoPro Black 10, I don't know, it's right here. So I'm using you as well, 4K, 30 frames per second, that matters. The only artificial anything we have here is a light, and that is an Amaran 60D. Because it's not super bright out today, it's kind of rainy, so I was like, let me just use some artificial light. I would always prefer that over the overhead lights because that just kind of casts weird shadows. Oh, and then the microphone. The microphone, I don't even remember getting this, but I think it was like 20 or 30 bucks, maybe, it's probably cheaper. And all it says is powered device. I don't know, but how do I sound? Let me know. Like, Joe doesn't even need headphones to do this. He's literally sitting there just like hanging out watching me. He's like, he doesn't even need to touch anything. So this is like pretty good deal for him. So let's get into some of the things that have happened so far. The first, and I think everyone can relate to this, is we haven't spent a ton of time on it. I don't want to say it's a passion project, but it's also not like this podcast is something that we're really hoping to, level up our brands or anything like that. So we've spent very little time on it, but even in the short amount of time that we've done it, we have 8 episodes recorded. They've mostly been food places because food places always say yes, and we always like to get the hookup if we can. So there's that aspect of it. And then I think once we went to a local park. The goal of our podcast, by the way, is to highlight some of the areas in Cape Fear that people don't live here, should know about in case they visit, or if people who are considering moving here, they could check out, okay? So we become kind of the mayors of the town, so to speak, by highlighting some of these awesome businesses. Time constraints, so that's number one. We have not spent a lot of time, like I said. Ann is an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, we both have our respective businesses. All we have is Fridays that are dedicated to recording podcast episodes. And in the event that we don't have anyone scheduled, then we will just literally, I will work on YouTube videos just like this, or I will work on short form content or anything along those lines. For her, she can catch up on some of her administrative things for her company, Little Fishy Swim School, and that's it. But the first thing I wanted to point out was we are in no rush, and you don't have to be in a rush either. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I actually find that people who really go ham, right away on a podcast tend to burn out a lot faster. So we're kind of moving methodical, but also a little slow at the same time. And that's my own fault because I haven't dedicated the time to just making all these reach outs each week or anything like that to prospective businesses. So there's that. Second thing is, like I mentioned, we have nothing published and nothing scheduled. We have not recorded our intro. We have not done our short description. We do not have cover art. We do not have branding or any of those things. And I'll tell you why that stuff doesn't matter, right now at least, is because we needed to get the recordings under our belt. The worst thing you can do is actually start with all those administrative tasks and just all these things that you could change at any given moment. And those are the things that actually delay you from recording. I feel a lot better about myself knowing that our delays in recording are literally just because of time constraints or because we haven't found businesses that we want, but we still have 8 done. If we were just focusing on those other things, then we would probably set ourselves back a lot more. That's something that I believe is really, really important for a lot of you to know, is that recording and finding your rhythm is the most important thing, which leads me to the third thing. Ann Lee and I have definitely done a better job, and I think, I don't know, Joe might agree, that we're better now bouncing questions, like going from one person to the other versus the beginning. It was kind of awkward, and although I'm a podcaster, it was definitely weird those first few episodes where I would say something and in my head I'm like, I hope she asks a question, and then I just kind of pause and I look at her and it's just like this weird moment in the podcast. That's what happens when you are two co-hosts who have not done anything like that together. Okay, it doesn't matter if we're married, but now I think we're a little bit more in sync, and we've incorporated better questions than we did in the very beginning. We bring an iPad with us or notes, and that's it. The fourth thing I've noticed is it's just becoming more fun, and fun is what's going to give you longevity. The last place we went was this place called Dram Yard, and we got there like 5 minutes after we got there, the fire alarm went off, and it was so funny, and I made this ridiculous, I have to put it on here. And our podcast is so hot, man. The fire department's here. It was just funny because we got to actually watch the general manager, or Vince, just kind of like sweating it a little bit, like, okay, I got a podcast, I got this, the place is opening in a couple hours. So that was pretty funny. And then afterwards, the AC went out, and we were all kind of toasty as it was in the middle of summer. We're like, dang, man, like, where's the AC at? But it just became fun because we got to see real life things. When you're doing more of a formal podcast, you don't get that kind of behind the scenes. We want to immerse ourselves in what's happening with these businesses, and we want to share those experiences. And guess what? The next time we go, we'll be able to laugh about it. We'll be able to say hey to Vince or anything like that. The fifth thing in just this type of podcast specifically is we always like to ask this question, which is definitely something you should do as well. What businesses do you think we should make a podcast about? And that's going to alleviate us having to think and do research. Now, of course, we still got to double check and be like, does this place have decent reviews? How long have they been around? What is our criteria for them? That definitely matters, but still, it just makes it a lot easier and simpler because they're probably reputable. And the reason I say it applies to you too is if you're not doing an in-person local podcast, but you're just doing your own, just interview podcast or something along those lines, virtually or in person, what you can do is if I'm interviewing Keith, and Keith is an amazing guest, once we're done recording, what I do is say, hey Keith, who are other guests who would crush it the way you just did? So number one, I'm literally complimenting him or her, depending on the interviewee, and just saying they did an amazing job. I want your type caliber guest on our show. Who would you recommend? And then this person can literally set up the intro for you. So it's more like a softball, and you don't have to go in cold. It's a warm lead for a podcast guest. So I would say that's a big one as well. Another thing we noticed is that Anne and I have absolutely zero desire to manage a Facebook page or an Instagram dedicated to the podcast, at least right now. No, never. Sorry, I do not want to. I will not want to. So I went on Upwork because I needed someone to help me distribute for my own company anyway. We were having a couple issues, so I had someone I found on Upwork in the Philippines. And for my company, a lot of my staff, actually all my full-time staff is in the Philippines, and they are savages. They are just absolute A players. I always like to say, and I don't mean to be disparaging to some of you marketing majors out there, but they would just absolutely crush you because you've just been sitting in class learning about marketing things that are evolving every single day, and you're probably getting old lectures and Tesla cases and Amazon cases and reading Harvard's business review. Meanwhile, my team's like in the thick of it, getting real life experience all the time, and they're just crushing it. But anyway, so I found this person on Upwork. I think it was $5 an hour, and so far she's doing awesome. And the reason I wanted to test her out for us is because if anything ever goes wrong with my content specifically for my company, we can do it. Okay, like we could do it, but I don't want my team doing it, and I don't want to do it. So if she could do that, then she could do it for us for the podcast as well. So the little strategy for that was very, very simple. I went into ChatGPT and I said, write me a job description for a social media manager, and it was like ridiculously long. I'm like, take this out, take this out, take this out. The biggest thing I took out was qualifications, because give me a break. Okay, you don't need qualifications or X amount of years at this university or this amount of experience. Like, no. If you are able to convey what you need and that person is able to digest it, then they're probably going to do a good job. So we're starting there, but that was another takeaway, is that we don't want to manage those social media channels, so we're finding someone to do it for us, and I'm trying them out in my own company. Probably on the part of not working is, again, soliciting places to go. Like, Ann and I have literally not had a conversation of whose responsibility that is. So I would say, like, that's actually critical, because you never want to be in a situation where those 8 episodes are scheduled or getting published and then we're going to run out of content and we need to find someone fast. The more people you have kind of lined up, the better. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is, if you want to see all this starting from scratch, how we came up with the idea, production, and all these different things, then you could go back to the beginning of this video kind of playlist, and you will find from scratch how we started doing it. So those are pretty much the learning lessons so far. I can't tabulate how many days days we've been at it, but we're gonna go ahead and probably use next week as an opportunity to look into some of the administrative things. All we need to do is record an intro. We need to record an outro. We probably need to make a trailer, and we probably need to get some cover art. So when it comes to cover art, I've made a video before on Instagram, so if you're not following me there, go ahead and follow me, and you can DM me as well at @richcardona_. But on Instagram, I just actually finished recording a video with Joe about how unimportant podcast cover art is. But this is something that you could literally outsource to Fiverr or 99 Designs and have a contest where multiple designers are gonna be looking into it. But what I don't want you to do is think that you're gonna go to Canva and you're gonna have to do it yourself. You could probably do it very affordably if you outsource it for people who do this kind of stuff every single day. So we're definitely gonna have to do that. Do we need a design agency? No. I'm literally using a phone and a GoPro right now because I just want to make sure that we're using some of the options that are available to everybody, okay? Not some of the fancy cameras that sometimes we use when we go out on location. So we're probably gonna get into those administrative things and then go from there. Once that's complete, we have some of the episodes audio edited already, and I will make a video on the audio editing process and the video editing process and how we came up with what we wanted. But what I can say about those things is once those are done, all we need to do is slap on the intro, slap on the outro. Oops, I forgot one key thing, a call to action. We have to record a library of calls to action, meaning like, hey, if you like this show, go ahead and rate and review it. If you know someone who's thinking about moving to North Carolina, definitely share this with them. In the middle of an episode, we could say something like, hey, if you're enjoying this podcast so far about Mess Hall, go to them and tell them you know Rich and Ann, and they're gonna give you a 10% discount, which is not true, but you never know. So calls to action are literally exactly what it sounds like. You are telling the audience to do something. You're telling the listening or viewing audience to do something, and you wanna do that in the middle of the episode where they are the most engaged, not at the end of the episode. You could also do one in pre-roll, which is before the episode actually even starts. All administrative things, in my opinion. These are like 30-second recordings, okay? The calls to action, the intro, the outro, and then the cover art. Once we have all that kind of stuff, there's zero reason we couldn't launch, period. So once we get there, which will probably be in the next video or two, we will go ahead and show you what we use, how we use it, the information you're gonna have to put in, and we might geek out a little bit on terms like RSS feed, things like that. We could talk about why you would want to use an MP3 versus a WAV file or vice versa. And we could talk about the type of video setup that you want, so that way you can make sure this content, which is made for YouTube, can actually be cut vertically, so that way you can use it on social media. But we're not in a rush. So I just wanted to give you an update on the process so far. We're gonna wrap it up there. If there's anything that you wanna know that I didn't cover, go ahead and email us at info@richcardonamedia.com, or you could DM me at richcardona_. And that is a wrap.